The reason why I want to discuss this one is that it is in a way similar to what we were doing here. We were trying to get in touch. We tried to get in touch with the GASB. We did get in touch with the GASB. We tried to get them to endorse our project, where we were proposing a grand vision, basically what an electronic reporting system should be, how the ideal one should be, and they did not endorse us. They didn't want to go down that road. Now this paper, what they did, they were also trying to do some analysis. Do you remember what we talked about last week and how you could run with government, with companies, etc. You can run all these data analytics, right? And internal auditors, for example, or external auditors, they always run all these types of analytics to identify exceptions, to see whether you're doing better or worse than comparable agencies or comparable companies in the private sector. Well, once again, we expected this data because it is it's supposed to be publicly available, even if it were upon request, that this should be easy. But it turned out to be very hard. You have certain sources of information where you can download this, basically like bond information, if you're doing bond analysis. You have, for example, subscriptions to databases. You have subscriptions to Bloomberg. But those are very expensive. So for the regular users, they don't have the means. Many of them, they cannot afford such subscriptions. If you want to download certain information regarding a private company, it's always easier to access than it is for governmental reporting. The Data Act, it's very clear, it's very important to understand. The Data Act is not talking about the financial statements. They are not talking about the CAFR statements. They are talking specifically about reports that will be filed to the federal government for grants. How did you spend the money that the federal government gave you? Okay? Now, this company, what they did, they said that they had some, while the data is available, they found that it was poorly accessible. So accessibility was not as easy. Even if you go to those websites where there are like all these initiatives that individual entities are trying to make their data more and more available for comparison purposes, etc. Like open data, OpenGov, USA spendings, etc. The problem with these is, again, that the numbers that they are giving you are at very high aggregate level. So if you want to dig deeper, it's hard. And this study, did you guys read it or not? I'll close my eyes. Just tell me if you did. Okay, I'm closing my eyes. No? Okay. So basically what they did, their solution was to basically come up with a taxonomy. They ran into the same issues. And this is to tell you that as researchers, if you try to do any analytics that are related or that use governmental reports, you might end up with the same problems. Those problems are basically that you might be comparing apples to oranges. So you want to make sure that what you're comparing are apples to apples. You want to make sure that those elements that you're looking at are actually the same elements when you're looking at municipality A and B. If you're comparing New Jersey to New York as a state, you need to know that those numbers are the same. For example, again, if you're looking at the pension, you need to know what items you're looking at. Are you looking at the pension, expenditure, or expenses? So it depends on each state and what standards they are using, what elements they are using, the description of the elements that they are using. Those are not standardized. So this paper, what they did, they actually proposed a taxonomy that they more or less, let's call it borrowed or adapted from the SEC's XBRL taxonomy, right? Anyone who read the paper can tell us in general what they did. Who can tell me why I wrote this? That's what bottom up. Yes, that was this paper. Yes. Most of the time, this is what they do. Yes. Okay. Fair is fair. She's the only one who talked. So I put minus Kristen. Yes, so what did they do? What they were trying, what did they want to do? So what are they trying to do from the beginning, basically? The big picture of the paper. Yes, so that was the context, yes. Yes, so what? Exactly. So what they tried to do here is to look at the taxonomy that is used by the government, by the private sector. Okay. Sorry. I erased it. I'm too kind to leave it on the screen for too long. See, I'm a nice person. Yes, exactly. Thank you so much. Thank you. That's better than the first one. So basically, what they were trying to do is they were trying originally to run search and analysis, apparently, like we had the same idea, and then they ran into the problem of accessing the data. Not only was it in PDF, but it was also in using different taxonomy, using different terminology. So okay, so the same element might mean different things. And because it cannot be mandated to do the same thing for everyone, basically they cannot mandate the same terminology to be used by all entities. They proposed to come up with, they proposed a taxonomy. They collected the taxonomy in the same way that I showed the Excel that I showed you earlier. They looked at the frequency of all these items. How many times did they show up? But again, they could not do it for all the kafir statement. It's simply not possible to do it individually. And here, they just made it like they had a survey of 289 statements. Okay? 60 statements. They had long-term debts. So the idea here of this example is that it was not possible to compare because it's not the same, they are not talking about the same item. And they also understand that there will be a cost. So this is again, why would a local government, a municipality for instance, use this type of reporting. Okay, now when it is mandated, as it's mandated by the Data Act, they have to report it in that format, period. They have no choice. They have to use that format. But, and this is like if you make the assumption of that, okay, so if we have this report, it's maybe easier to use it for another thing. That's an assumption. We don't know whether this will be too costly for them to adopt or not. We don't know if they are going to do it or not. There is a cost to local governments, an additional cost of reporting this in XBRL, for example, because they were using XBRL here. Okay? So at this point, it is important to see the cost benefit of such data. And they were, like you said, Kristen, they were trying to compare bonds. And if you use EMMA, you will either have to look at outdated information, that is the credit rating when the bond was issued, or you have to examine the CAFR statements yourself, which is again not that easy with PDF. So what they propose is to use XBRL, and according to the paper, it has several advantages. It is used already by public companies, users are familiar with it, and technology is currently available. And then they say, the paper, what they did. So they standardized the elements, which you know that it was not easy. Actually, we have some numbers, I think, in this next slide. Here, this is just the numbers and how it started going down, just to get something manageable. So what do you think? What do you guys think? Think about it this way. Okay, so the authors are proposing an XBRL taxonomy that can be used by local governments to report certain statements. Do you think this would be adopted? Yes. That's true, okay. So you mean, so your point is that if it is reported in this way, then there must be a reason why it's reported in this way.
Yes.
Now the question would be, is this reason still holding? There might have been a reason. There might, maybe in the past, there was a reason to report it in this way.
Yes.
Is it still the same? Is it still currently the same reason? Is it still present? Remember that, for example, if the standard was 30 years old, 30 years ago, you didn't have the same technology that is available today. So maybe this has changed. But why don't governments simply just standardize it? Exactly. So what's in it for them? State of New Jersey. Why would they change the standard? If it's working, don't fix it. Isn't it like that? If it's not broken, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. As far as they are concerned, it's working so far. Yes? Exactly. So there is a cost to coming up with this taxonomy. And if you guys are used to providing a certain report, if you are a municipality and you already have in place a report that you just update every year and then you file it, right? But if this comes, you still need to do what? You have to change. And people, they resist change. People don't like to change, right? If you're used to doing it, if you're preparing the report this way, why would you change? Unless, like you said, there was a change in office. Someone changed and someone came, basically decided to require a different format. If it's not mandated, most likely it's not going to be accepted. There are benefits to having machine-readable formats, but who's going to prepare the filing? Who's going to prepare the report? Is it the citizen or is it the local government? It's the local government who's reporting that. So you need to think about this. What would make it successful? What would make such taxonomy successful? What do you think? You were raising your hand? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes? Adopted. Yes. Basically, so basically it has to be mandated. Bribing them, basically. So let's. Okay. I didn't know that, by the way. I did not know that, but thank you for telling me about this. But yes, so there are ways where they can basically give them either incentives, maybe by, for example, assuming the cost of implementing this, because they know that there will be a cost to it. And as you can see here, they did mention that there is a cost to this. So there is a cost to local government to switch to a new system. And by the way, when you think about a municipality, you think about like they have an accounting department or etc. But in many areas, they have a very small city or like a very small municipality where they don't even have a finance person. So basically, they ask someone to come from outside to prepare their financial statements that they need to report. It's a municipality like that or an entity like that. Do you really think that they have the means of taking this? And this goes in line with the new job, what do you call it? The job bill, right? This is where they are trying, the SEC, they are also taking into consideration maybe cutting or basically cutting back on the reporting of SEC or on the XBRL, right? Which is huge. And that will also have a very big impact on the Data Act and on electronic reporting, basically this kind of reporting by governmental agencies. Because at that point, if small businesses will be exempt from reporting an XBRL, then why would also small government agencies also have to report an XBRL? And here, what I did, this is just to show you how hard it is to compare these elements. So they started off with 724 CAFR statements. They had to convert them from PDF to HTML. Just doing that, they lost almost half of them. Only 377 were actually converted. Then they had to write a Python code to extract the data and basically to make sure that the tables, etc., are correct. And even later on, they found that there were issues with it, and they lost additional elements and additional statements. They had to cancel them. They were not able to use all the 377 again because there was issues with the conversion. And then that was only for 8 statements from the CAFR statement. It was not for everything. When we did it, remember Chao and Denise, this was the one that we showed you. We had 6 states. And that was not easy. You had to look at each one of them and look at all the elements that are inside and copy them one by one. And what we did at that point, we had this, we wanted to get the frequency. So that was basically a similar approach. They did it on a larger scale. They started with 95,000 terms. Those are 95,000 line elements. Out of these 95,000 elements, they were not unique. They were able to narrow them down after mapping and manually going over them, etc., to 234. Those 234 are after they excluded any item that showed up less than 20 times. So basically, out of all these statements that they examined, 20, this is like 6% of what they actually examined. So if it showed 6% of the statements, they included it in the taxonomy. They looked later on at them and they grouped them, and they found that this is not, many of them are actually similar. So they decided, they made the decision which one to use. And this is what they called by a top-down approach. This is how the frequency showed up. Basically, this is how many times they found. For example, long-term liabilities due within, it showed up, for example, like 5 times. So this one here, it showed up, for example, 5 times. Long-term liabilities due within 1 year, it was also showed 5 times. Now, how close these are, etc., that's a totally different issue. Here, we're not looking at their taxonomy and saying that it is good or not. This is not our point here. What simply wanted to show you here was that this is what they tried to do, and it took them a long time to do that for 8 statements. And they only had 724 CAFR statements. Imagine if you have to do that for all the over 80,000 municipalities in the US. Multiply that by 10,000. Can you do that? Is it doable? So this is what we mean here is that unless it is mandated, it's unlikely to be adopted. Now, in our opinion, what do you guys think a good reporting be? Transparent. So let me just change the color here to transparent. You said? Standardized. What do you think? Meet. Oops. Sorry for that. So. That's okay. I changed the color. Sorry for that. Just ignore this. Meet the demands. Yes. Easy to access, basically. Okay. Information, easy to access. Kristen? Accurate. Timely. So you have timely. Oops. Accurate. What about bad reporting? Opposite. So basically you can say the opposite. Right? PDF, for example. So we can say PDF. I like PDFs when it is simply to print something. I don't like it when I have to extract data from it. And we wanted to allow us to run all these. So what do we expect it to provide us with? Now, as you can see, we are done with what is currently being done. This is what, in an ideal world, what would the ideal governmental reporting be? How would it look like? Here, we're talking about like how it should be, in our opinion, of course. What do you think it should allow you to do? What do you think it should allow you to do? Yunsan. Actually, not you. Tiffany. Say something, please. Just one word, and I will. One word. I said one word. Okay. So compare different reports, right? Okay. Analyze aggregate and disaggregate data. Yes, Vincent. Easy access, right? So before we move on, I want to show you something. Are you guys familiar with Frank? You guys know Frank? Not Frank Sinatra. Frank as in F-R-A-A-N-K. Do you remember the candidate last week who was presenting? She talked about the patent that is owned by, it had also the name of Raj Srivastava, Miklos, and Alex Kogan. If I'm not mistaken, this is the patent. So let me show you how it looks like. Can you guys see it? Can you guys see it? Okay, let me make it bigger. If you can't see it, why don't you say so? Again, don't tell me Chinese culture. That's simply, I can see it. Increase the size of the screen. Is it better like this? Okay. So Frank allows you to extract data easily. And again, I'm not saying that this is the ultimate thing. It's simply like to show you a way of easily getting this data. And I believe we have a subscription for that as Rutgers. So you have access to this one. Let's say that you want to extract certain information regarding Microsoft. So let's say that you want to, I hope that it's not too slow to do that. This time I don't need to relog in. Okay, for a certain reason, we're supposed to have different access to it, but here it doesn't always work. So Microsoft. You click on Microsoft, for instance, you have all these data. You can have it either as raw filing, that's in text format, or as XBRL. Okay? They also have what we call seqinf. This is where you can extract specific information. And we have here someone who used it several times, right? Kyungi? You did. Yes, she did. So basically you can look for specific, let's say that you're looking at Chief Executive Officer. You can look at the company's name. Again, we want Microsoft. Don't ask me why it shows Microsoft. And the reason why here I have like 2002 is that this is the only one that is free. There is a problem with my account. I cannot access the paid one. So you look, you hit search, and then it would get you the results here. It will show you in each one of them as paragraph or as table, etc., where this information is. So this is considered more or less as easier access. This is much easier than PDF. And if you are interested in learning more about Frank, I can talk to you, or SeekInf, let me know, and I can talk to you more about this later on. Okay? Any questions? Now, again, so what do we expect it to allow us to do? Compare different reports, right? Analyze, aggregate, and disaggregate data. We have, what did I write here? Oh, easy access. Yeah, don't laugh. I honestly sometimes can't read my own handwriting. Yes. So, what else? Accuracy. So, timeliness. What else you were saying? Sorry? To edit the data that you extract, okay. So you can actually manipulate it, right? Manipulate the data. How about you want a reporting that would allow you to analyze the compliance with the standards, right? Let's say that you are a policymaker also. You are an oversight or legislative body, and you want to see how compliant your reporting is with the standards. So you have compliance. What else? You want the system to allow you to predict any financial problems that this entity might have in the future. Again, going back to Detroit, and I know that Michael said that a lot of people knew about this problem, but maybe they knew about it too late, or it wasn't simply too, I don't know, maybe too obvious. And here I'm just saying maybe. So you have all these things that you expect an ideal reporting system to provide you with. All the stakeholders, that would include, that we discussed before. And again, this is ideal speaking. So you have citizens, you have policymakers, legislative bodies, you have auditors, investors, creditors, analysts. Sorry? Each one of them would want something different. This is what ideally it could provide you with. If it was really what they call transparent reporting, you do expect it to provide you with this. If it were really transparent. I did not say that this is what we... Okay, so let me rephrase. What you expect from it. This is what you would expect from an ideal transparent reporting. Wouldn't you expect it to be able to allow you to run comparative analysis across entity to find exceptions? I'm not saying if you want it or not. I'm saying that this is what you expect it to be able to do if it were really transparent.
But say they did want this, then why has it happened for the last 50 years?
Probably because not everyone wants it. Probably because they don't want to assume the cost. There is a cost to it. What if their needs contradict each other? And this is what is most likely the case right now. And this is why the Data Act was kind of unique at this point, because the Data Act did require this kind of, more or less this kind of reporting for specific, on a very limited base. We still need to see how it is actually implemented. But the idea behind the Data Act would be that they actually require them to use this kind. Spendings, yes. Yes.
It's quite different from
I totally agree with you.
deciding how you spend money.
I totally agree with you. I agree with you. And this was, I think, we don't even know how it will go, the Data Act.
The thing is, I think the concern here is that you are force-fitting a system that was borrowed from the private reporting.
That's even more than the private reporting.
right? But you're applying it to a setting which researchers may not fully understand.
But this is not. This is actually more than the private sector.
Yeah.
This is higher than the private sector. The
Well,
private sector would not provide you, for example, with aggregate data.
Because that makes it even more unlikely.
And again, we're not saying that this is what's going to happen in the near future. Going back to, for example,
I mean, there's a difference between design science and visual thinking.
no, it's not. It's not that. Well, at that point, you can say the same thing about continuous auditing. That it's not, because it was proposed in 1990, and now we're in 2014, and you still don't see it really happening.
What researchers did was try and understand the incentives to the players involved, what they wanted, and so on. And there are papers written on those topics, right? I mean, the point here is, you know, to be careful about saying is that what we expect from it. I mean, we can be more precise.
From an ideal one,
But it's not here. I mean, you can't say something's ideal because it's like whose vision of ideal it is, right?
I see your point. Point taken. So basically,
But in terms of actual technical application, XBRL, I think the government reporting is more suited than the public company reporting, because public companies only want to report at a certain layer above. That's why it's basically been like a translation tool more than anything. And they haven't really realized any positive results from it, except that SEC has an easier time comparing companies, doing analysis across industries. But the government reporting, you can actually take it from the tag that's bottom up and get more of the XBRL functionality out of it.
if you're talking here, I think you talk about like who's we. What do we mean by we?
But the thing is,
Who would want that,
what
right?
he said is actually support of my argument, right? I mean, in the government, in the private sector, the argument is that disclosure leads to lower cost of capital. But even so, there is no demand for disaggregate reporting, right? In fact, there is no demand even for XBRL reporting, right? A lot of people want to get rid of XBRL reporting.
True, and this is the job here that we're talking about.
It's not really working as a design in the public company reporting, because it only does to a certain level.
Well, so precisely.
Right.
So if there is no demand to go for a higher level in the private sector, why would there be in the government sector?
Because the government.
Because it's different. The performance.
Government, there's no layer, there's no stop in terms of transparency. Government belongs to the people. The government's bosses are the taxpayers, not some CEO or the stockholder.
We the people, right?
We the people, right?
The government
So, like,
belongs to the people in power,
Right.
not to the people, because there is no real incentive for any individual taxpayer to do anything, right? I mean, they have even less stake in it than somebody who owns one share in IBM, right? I mean,
Well,
the kind of person who you mentioned, who goes and files lawsuits and this and so on, right? You know, another name for them commonly is crank, right?
Well, most people pay more taxes per year than they do investing their money. I mean, in private companies.
And there's very little you can do about it,
Right.
right?
So
Because
I
you
would,
only have one board.
So in this case, your point is that there will be no need for something like that, for an increased
No,
transparency.
my point is that if we are researchers, we must understand full dimensions of this problem before we propose solutions for it, right? I mean, and right now I don't think we do. I mean, there is after all entire field of academic inquiry called political science, which looks nothing, it does nothing but look at government, right? Okay, but we're not citing any of that research, right?
well,
I mean, others,
Wait.
we are trying to reinvent the wheel here.
I mean, we're not doing department research in this question. Like right now, the public administration.
School of Public Administration. Actually, Mark Holzer, we're talking to them actually about a joint project with them regarding this, specifically with that.
They're saying the same problems we're studying, because the big problem is we have all this debt, and they've got government expenditures, and it's like it's out of control. There's like very little. They're looking for outside intervention. At least the government is like.
Well,
And this is not like
but just to clarify, public administration is not the same as political science.
okay, but they are doing research with regard to that, and actually they are developing some kind of a website for expenditures, etc. by from Newark and stuff like that. I can't remember the exact name of the website, and I agree with you. This is a new area for us,
Right.
actually here, basically, and doing research in the accounting department. mostly, so the car lab has started doing that, and we have several students who started doing that only for the past couple of years, not even a couple of years, but we are basically still learning what kind of research can be done about this. But still, when you look at it and you see that the Data Act was actually is actually going to require, or is actually requiring, a higher level of transparency, then we're not saying that who basically, at that point you can say, well, who made this happen? Who's benefiting from it? The federal government, right? But they already had all these resources, all these reports, I'm sorry. So they already had all these reports filed to their agencies. Then why would they require this standardized format? There was pressure for it, there was a need for it, and they found that the cost benefit, they are still actually not sure about the cost benefit, because according to the Data Act, the OMB and the US Treasury, they are supposed to report after 2 years from the, basically after 2 years from the start of the pilot test on the benefits of it, basically. So they want to see if it is really beneficial or not.
You've got to have a more
But still, they still want to see if it is. For the pilot test, after the end of at the end of the second year from the pilot test, they are required to, the OMB and the US Treasury, they have to basically report on the results of the pilot tests. Yeah.
all I'm saying is provide context, right? So, for example, the Data Act was passed by a Republican House, right? Because Republicans,
No, actually, it was unanimous.
I don't know, proposed. I mean, it's been proposed for many years, right? It was eventually passed. Now, why? Because many Republicans think carbon expenses are wasteful, and they want to identify them, right?
Democrats as well.
The Senate passed it unanimously, so did the House. So it was embraced by both parties.
Now,
Yeah, that's the last time around.
yes,
They took the word
Actually, the people who started with it were not even, they were like this data coalition, data transparency coalition. It's like, it's a group of companies and group of people who were pushing for increased transparency. So there is a lot of politics playing a role here. And anyway, think about, I don't know, I see this kind of thing similar to the audit data standard. Anyway, unless, this is my personal opinion, unless it is mandated, it's not going to be adopted. People might disagree with me, I don't know. But personally, I think if it's not mandated, and I think one time, like we said that to Amy and to Bill, but they were not very happy about hearing that. They wanted to think that companies will voluntarily adopt that audit data standard, and we know that's not going to happen. I think only HP, right? And probably they have a different incentives. They have different, basically. Sorry? I don't know. So this is why. I mean, I understand that with continuous auditing, there were several papers that studied, etc. But was it actually implemented in real life? Not in all companies, but at least many companies now, they have one kind of or another of continuous control monitoring, like Siemens or Procter & Gamble, etc. I don't know. Although it's been there for like 30, basically, I don't know, like 25 years, but still. And here, what we mean by we, it could be not, for example, the preparers, but policymakers and the GASB. Well, the GASB, they did tell us that they want something like that. So if you're saying that, who wants it? The GASB, they were pushing us to actually come up with a taxonomy, a governmental XBRL taxonomy. They stated it clearly. We did not pursue that project simply because it's not actual research. But this is what they wanted. They wanted us to develop a governmental taxonomy similar to the SEC's XBRL taxonomy. They wanted to have something, let's say, GovGap, instead of like US GAAP, basically, I don't know. And they were pushing for it. They don't have the authority to mandate it, but they wanted it. So, to go back to your question, maybe standard setting boards, users like citizens, it could be investors, they would be pushing for something like that. They would want something like that. Who wouldn't want something like that? It could be basically, I don't know, it could be preparers. They don't want to be graded, but people in the opposite party, the other party, they would want that. And this is what you said earlier, right? They want to expose, and this is how the Data Act, like this is what you're saying, that the Data Act was passed mostly because they wanted to say that Democrats were wasteful or something like that. This is what you were mentioning, right? So basically, there might be a need in one way or in another. This is what people might expect from a really, again, this is what we expect. This is our vision of in this case, it's our here. Yes?
But the government, I think, to go to your point, the government's basically, aren't they releasing Medicaid data recently because they want help from outside, from armchair auditors to analyze the data, find fraud?
I don't know, but when we try,
They are releasing it.
you remember our trip to the Medicaid in Trenton?
This is the federal level I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
But when we went there, I mean, they were running supposedly some kind of analysis to see to identify exceptions and possible frauds, etc. But they couldn't do it across states, etc. So it was kind of messy. There is a push to identify more exceptions, to try and predict exceptions.
Yeah.
So basically, to try and predict certain problems with, I don't know, some entities that might have financial problems. So here you would expect it, and this is what we mean. But we mean like what various stakeholders or users might think of it. So, for example, the GASB, they did look at they did tell us that they would want us to come up with a reporting system that would provide for additional transparency, and that would allow them to see if there is some kind of I don't know, how do you call it? Some kind of compliance, basically if they have compliance with the standards or not. They wanted to see, basically you have investors. And this is what they were telling us as well, that certain investors, they want to know, or they want to be able to analyze different municipalities, not simply using EMMA, which would require them to either use outdated information or to use PDFs, but actually to use more updated information and at higher level, basically to be able to analyze those entities. Again, you have all types of reports that right now are not easily prepared. For example, like this citizen who's trying to find how much his municipality is paying for dispatch compared to the county. If you want to see where your money from the taxes that you paid will go back, and this is the latest, we'll talk about that a little bit later. So if you're trying here to identify anomalies, this is a lot of entities try to identify outliers. They run and they try, even with the Trenton, the Division of Local Government Services, with all those PDF files or Excel files or hard copies that they receive and re-enter in Excel. They told us that they run exception detection analysis. And when we asked them, how do you do that? I mean, you have PDFs. They said that they have to re-enter all the information, and usually if they identify anything, it is months later, and they just run a specific, like a very simple analysis. This is all they can do with the amount of time that they have. They cannot do any exceptional exceptions. So they cannot, for example, identify those exceptions at higher level because it's hard to compare. So you would expect an ideal reporting system to be comparable across entities to allow you to identify, to run certain, to get a benchmark that would allow you to identify exceptions, and then that would rank them right? And prioritize them. And if you find that there is an issue with the reporting, then you bring in the big guns. You bring the RoboCop. This is what the SEC are trying to do right now. They have what they call, I think it's called accounting quality model or auditing quality model, usually referred to as the RoboCop. So the SEC's RoboCop, what it does, it actually analyzes the XBRL, or this is what they claim to do, because they never tell you what they're actually doing with it. We try to get them to tell us. But officially, basically what they say, what they claim to do is they analyze XBRL reportings, etc., to identify those exceptions. And then you have, like we said, compliance. You have find identities, like entities that have problems, try to predict which entities might fall, might default, etc., the likelihood of default, blah, 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 all these things that we talked about. So run all these reports, and then from our perspective, it would be the ideal one would be when you can run on demand, more like on-demand audits, rather than doing something because you expect it, because it is available, because it's supposed to be made available if you upon request. If it were to be made available from the beginning, think of it this way. Imagine that a reporting system that has the capability of where you can drill down, not just aggregate, but also disaggregate. This goes back to my parking ticket that I paid, and I'm upset with the parking ticket, and I want to see how the municipality, I want to trace it back. If you have the option of looking at each transaction and see where the money went, and this is what they said that, for example, checkbooks, if you can analyze it, and we're trying to do that actually right now, trying to ask for those reports and try to analyze it. Compare this information to what is reported and see if it actually checks or not. Here, this is one of Miklas's favorite slides. This is what's current in the current state. Reporting, governmental reporting is redundant. Those entities, they have to report to file those reports, like various reports to the state, the federal government, to other agencies, etc. Most of the time, they are in PDF. Best case scenario, they are in text or in CSV, which makes it slightly easier, but still, it needs a lot of work. At this point, this you can, what can be done with this one right now, the type of reports that are available are CAFR statements, you have the reports to the MSRB, you have also various reports that are reported to different agencies, and those are, like I said, in Excel or in PDF. So this is the current state. What can be done right now, and what in certain cases is being done for analysis, those are extracted. Okay, so those information are extracted. So let's say that you want to run some analysis. Okay, bond analysis. You want to run some research. What do you have to do? You have to extract the data, create your own, basically, database. So if you want to do it on a larger scale, this has to be done on a larger scale. You have a data receptacle, basically, data repository, where you would add all these extracted reports from PDF, etc. And, like, for example, the Division of Local Government and Services in Trenton, they told us that they were trying to come up with, to create a database in XML, and I'm not even sure that they do understand what XML is, because they gave me two different information. But I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. They said that they were trying to create a database from those budget reports that are filed by various municipalities and other entities. They're trying to put them all in one data receptacle where it would have, people would have access to it. When we asked them to give us this database that they have already collected, we're still waiting for it since 2014. 2013. I think it was 2013. Basically, it's not easy to get, but they said that they will make it available in 2016 in Excel. Still better than nothing. And finally, what you would do with that, once you have this data repository, that would be more or less similar to like CompuStat, where you can run where you can type different reports. For example, for bond analysis, you can create reports that citizens want. This is citizen-centric reporting, etc. Okay, and policymakers can run analysis for compliance. The latest, or this is like Michael said, this is wishful thinking. So this is, at this point, it's not happening. This is where the tagging, for example, of this, or the standardization happens at the level of the ERP systems, the database or the accounting systems of various entities. At this point, if you have all the municipalities using the same standard taxonomy, and if these systems are linked to the government data repository, what would this allow you to do is to tap into the accounting systems of those entities and then run disaggregate level, transactional level analysis. Now, whether this is going to happen or not, that's not what we're saying. In my opinion, maybe my great-great-grandchildren might see it. But I don't think, or I think that this is what we think that it's supposed to be. It doesn't mean that this is going to happen. Yes. Yes. So rather than requesting. You cannot change them.
Because, like, what if there's errors in the transaction or something?
Well, you can delay it. So there, at that point, you can have, like this says here, like in close to real time. So it doesn't have to be like today. It could be, for example, updated every week. It could be read only. So I cannot add. You cannot have it like in real time, because what if at that time, at that specific moment, someone was making a mistake and they were canceling it, etc. So no, it's not going to be like that. It's never going to be like that. Yes, and at that point, if you think of it, it would be like more or less like on demand. It doesn't mean that this is real time. This is not going to be like, for example, okay, so as soon as someone basically swipes a credit card or pays in a check, you can already see it. There's also the demand side of it here. So even if you supply this level of reporting, would people really want that? I mean, on demand, yes. But do you want it really in real time? Do you care about knowing that, like what happened 5 minutes ago? Not to that point. I mean, but you do want to know it before 6 months after the end of the year. You don't want to wait like 6 months after the end of the year. But you want to know it, for example, let's say within a week or two or a month. So if you have reporting that is like from, look, think about it this way. Companies, they have quarterly reports. Why don't governments do that? Governments, they have yearly reports, and that you can see it 6 months later when it's too late. Then if this is possible for, again, there is also always the demand. Goes back to Michael's point. There's the demand side of it. Do they really want it or not? It depends on who wants it. Yeah.
I was just going to say, because I'm thinking of public reporting, the quarterly reports are still reviewed by an auditor, so would there be some sort of oversight if it's on demand?
Well, there's state level auditors, there's federal level auditors.
Okay, so there would be a
Yeah.
similar.
There must be some kind of verification of the data, otherwise it's useless.
Yeah, because otherwise I feel like I'm just going to have control.
Like your towns are audited by your local accounting firms.
So that would
And then
probably
larger-
apply.
This does not really mean real-time access to it.
Because I first interpreted it as like a free-for-all.
No, it's not that. But who would want actually to have like a real-time access to it? Like maybe oversight boards, like the auditors might want to have some kind of a dashboard, so as soon as something goes wrong, they want to see it. Maybe like I don't know, the mayor want to see to have some kind of like admin dashboard or something like that. Any questions? Okay, I was told that today's lecture was even worse than last week, so I'm sorry for that. Sorry if I bored you. Stop with the culture, okay? Start talking. This is what you do for a living now. How are you going to explain in class, to give a lecture in class, if you cannot express yourself? I know that you can express yourself. You simply don't want to ask the questions. Ask. Do you have any questions?